Remember back in 2018, the master of the photo op, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, went down to the border where immigration officers had detained families, including some children who were trafficked across the border. Now, they were in a form of detention which had fences, and it was a very dramatic moment. AOC posed tearfully at children in cages. It became a crisis. Well, there were a few hundred detainees back then, but look at this. More than 10,000 people who have crossed the border who are now under a bridge, outdoors, in the elements with very poor food, clothing, shelter, medicine. It's a disaster, yet Kamala Harris, the border czar, according to President Biden, is nowhere to be seen. What a crisis. But does the media care anymore? Where are those glamorous photo ops? AOC is nowhere to be found. But our friend Joel Pollak, senior editor-at-large at Breitbart.com, is right here. He joins us now via Skype from the Los Angeles area. Joel, great to see you again. It's been a little while since we've talked. We've been so focused on the Canadian federal election. I've never seen such a thing as is happening on the U.S. border. It's like an entire town is waiting to cross in. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, a large number of people have received the implicit memorandum that there's an open border at the southern U.S. border with Mexico, and that the Biden administration is letting people in if they're part of family units. The only people really being turned away are, in some cases, single males. So if you arrive with children, or you're a pregnant woman, or you have a family, you can basically find your way into the United States. Theoretically, you could be deported. You might have to show up for a court date at some point in the future. But everybody trusts the Biden administration to drop those obligations, and they're hoping Democrats will pass some kind of amnesty. They know there's no more border enforcement. So the word has gone out, and the latest wave of migrants is Haitian refugees. Now, these are not people coming directly right now from Haiti, which has suffered political turmoil and an earthquake. These are people displaced by earlier problems who have been living comfortably or uncomfortably in other parts of the Western Hemisphere, specifically in places like Chile in South America. And they are making their way north through Central America with the assistance of cartels. And they are arriving at the Rio Grande at the southern border of the United States, and they are crossing over. And they're crossing over by the thousands. And there are so many of them that the existing Border Patrol facilities cannot house them and cannot even process them. So there are tens of thousands of them living under an underpass near the Del Rio crossing in Texas. And the Biden administration finds this very embarrassing, so they are threatening and warning they're going to deport some people. They have removed several thousand people, but they've allowed several thousand others to remain in the United States. So while they're talking one game, they're playing another, and everybody is onto it, including most of all the migrants and the cartels. So we have a complete breakdown of law and order at the border, and that breakdown is gradually making its way across the rest of the United States. The migrants are being flown to other places, they're being moved to other states, and the American people, including Democrats, blame the Biden administration for its deliberate policy decision not to enforce existing border laws and border protections. There's also a dust-up over the use of horses. Now, you know how this usually goes, right? There's some kind of image or video that circulates, and once in a while there's something really bad happening, but a lot of the time it's the prejudice of the viewer or interpreter or the person putting it out on social media. So there was a video and some photographs of Border Patrol agents on horseback, and one of them was grabbing the T-shirt of a migrant, and the reins on the horse seemed to be flying out at an odd angle. In another video, a Border Patrol officer is seen waving one end of his reins in a circular motion in an attempt to intimidate one of the migrants, appropriately so, you could argue, from crossing the river, which the migrant was not allowed to do. No use of lethal force or even direct force of any kind, but basically just trying to provide an obstacle that would deter the migrant. That was turned into a story about Border Patrol officers in cowboy hats using whips against Black Haitian migrants in scenes reminiscent, we were told, of slavery and the hunt for escaped slaves crossing into freedom. That made the White House very upset, we are told, and now they are going to shut down the use of horses in the Del Rio sector. Now, if you've been to the U.S. border, and I have, you'll know that Border Patrol agents often ride on horseback, the reason being that's the best way to get around some of that border terrain. So now, if you're telling the Border Patrol agents they can't use horses, that means they can't stop the migrants at the border. They can't outrun the migrants at the border. They can't disperse the migrants at the border. They can't use the one vehicle or the one device that has been somewhat useful on some of these patrols in remote regions. And it's all because of a kind of hate crime hoax. And we're going through a whole investigation now in the usual rigmarole. And this is, again, a common practice along the border under Democratic and Republican administrations. There's nothing racial about it. If it's racist, then Democrats should dismantle all the horse-mounted patrols they have in every major city, including here in LA, including the liberal, almost communist enclave of Santa Monica nearby here, which has horses as well. I've seen them on patrol with the police. I mean, horses are useful, especially in crowd control, and that's why the Border Patrol were using them. There's nothing nefarious or racist about it. But that's the latest wrinkle and the latest chapter in this seemingly never-ending saga of Joe Biden's failure at the border.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.